Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, great. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Giving Circles Go remote session. Very excited to have all of you here with us. It's a great turnout, and we're just really excited to be talking with all of you on this topic. I'm the founder and CEO of Grapevine.org, Emily Rasmussen, and Grapevine is an online home for giving circles. So we have been supporting a lot of giving circles over the past year with going remote. So I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation with all of you and share some of what we've seen and also take a look at what we think might be around the corner. I just want to take a moment to thank the 100 Who Care Alliance, Emily and Jean in particular, for their help organizing this event and Philanthropy Together for their partnership and for putting together this whole incredible summit. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to be part of this incredible event. Would love to have everyone who's here take a minute to please introduce yourself. In the chat, let us know where you're calling in from and maybe even let us know the weather there. I can see a little bit of indication of weather in some of these places that you're dialing in from, but not everyone has their video on. So let us know what the weather's like. It's springtime, so you just never quite know. It'll be interesting to hear. I'm in New York right now, and the weather is actually pretty sunny and lovely, so I'll contribute that. So just quickly, while you're doing that, saying hi, wanted to let you know the plan for today. So what we'll do is we'll start off just very quickly with a bit of reflection on some of the inspiring ways that giving circles have gone virtual over the past year and learn from others. Just a few minutes, we're going to do a little reflection video, which should be fun to look at and hear from some giving circles, what they've done. And then what we want to do is spend the bulk of the time, though, really looking ahead to what's next, where events and community building are going with hybrid and in-person events. So our goal for this is really for you to walk away feeling inspired and supported and really ready to chart this next phase. And for you to even have some tangible ideas and resources and tools that you can take back to your giving circle so that you can start to move forward with your group. So with that, I see some nice comments coming in the chat. Thank you. Windy, but beautiful. Good, sunny and warm. Good for you in Ontario. Berkeley too. All right. You're never quite sure in the Bay Area. Okay, good. We'll keep those coming in. And while those are coming in, we will go ahead and tee up a video. This is going to share with you just like I said, a few highlights of what some giving circles have looked like over the past year. So we'll start with that and we'll go from there.
For Access Sports, Joyce Sloan for Elmhurst Learning and Success Academy of Elmhurst University. This one's a duplication, so we'll be picking one more. And lastly is Lisa Faber for Misericordia Home for the Disabled.
Hi there, I'm Iola Young, one of the organizers for 100 Plus Women, Juneau, Alaska. We have had 6 rounds of giving. 5 of them have been done virtually. Only the first one was in person back in January 2020. And I'll tell you, we're not going to go back to in person because we've had such tremendous success. We now have 279 members, and in just 6 rounds of giving, those generous women have donated over $137,000 to our small community of just 30,000 citizens. We've used MailChimp, the Alliance Zoom account, and Doodle Poll. It was quite a stretch for 4 the 4 organizing women because we're all in our late 60s, but we figured it out, so you can too. I think part of our success is that people are just so generous, of course, during the pandemic, but also doing it virtually means it's so accessible to any woman here in our community, whether they're juggling 1 job or 2 jobs, families, volunteer activities, homeschooling, things like that. All they had to do was log on for less than an hour 4 times a year to be part of this wonderful organization. So, thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Emily, for sharing that. And thank you everyone who shared some screenshots and videos and images that we could share today. So it was just a little bit of a snapshot at what happened over the last year with Giving Circles. Socially distanced, name pulling out of the hat, lots of Zoom calls, lots of new tools, whether it was Mentimeter or Jamboard or any number of other things. So it's been an interesting year, but I think what you see is people had fun with it. People experienced, like the group in Alaska, right? Even increased access and growth for their Giving Circles. We've heard that over and again from Giving Circles we've talked to, who've been really excited about the members that they saw for the first time in years, or new members who could join for the first time ever. And ultimately just a lot of flexibility and creativity and maybe even a little bit of courage along the way from our Giving Circle leaders and members to find a new way forward. So congrats to everyone for getting this far and taking on that challenge over the last year. So what we want to do is just share in the chat now. We made a promise to you that you would walk away with some tactics, some tools. So we're going to share a document in the chat, which has some tips and tricks based on the last year of these virtual Giving Circle events. Lots of information in there, resources for you. Emily or Taisha, if you could please drop that in the chat, that would be great. And this is a document that all of you can click through to access. There are probably a number of things that you've heard about that aren't in here yet though. So please add those in the chat, or just tell us in the chat what you used that's even in this document that worked well for you or not. We promise you that we will pull all of that information in, and whatever is not in the doc yet, we will add it in. So we really want this to be a living document that's adding value to you. So keep sharing in the chat, take a look at that doc, and we'll add more information in there as we go on throughout the session today. So the next phase of our event is really about looking forward. And so one thing we keep hearing from Giving Circles is, okay, we've done enough Zoom calls. Now what? Now people want to come back together, but some people are a little nervous about coming back together. How am I going to keep doing Zoom so some of those members who could finally join can still participate, but still then bring back those other members who want to be in person, right? So that's what the conversation today is focused on. I am super excited to introduce our panelists who are here with us. Very happy that they're here to join us today to talk about this. They are community building experts, event pros. I joked earlier that I should just get out of the way and let them do this whole thing, which is a joke, but is also true. And so I'm going to do that now. Rei Chou is the founder of The Feast, and Beth McIntyre is the head of community at Bevy and CMX Media, which is a community for community builders. So both of them have incredible experience building communities and doing events globally and across a number of different mediums, in person, hybrid, online. So we're going to have a conversation with both of them. I'll let each of them introduce themselves. But I also just wanted to note Susan McPherson was going to be here today, and I'm sorry she's not able to join after all, as she's recovering from a recent surgery. She's fine, but we will have a great conversation with Ray and Beth. So with that, I will pass it off to you, Ray, to get us started, and then we'll hand it over to Beth to introduce herself.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Thank you all for having me. So great to be here. I just want to say I'm super inspired by Giving Circles and by everything that the team, but also all of you are doing or inspired to do. I know myself, I'm actually inspired to start a Giving Circle now. So I'm super excited to join you as a community member as well. And yes, I'm the founder of The Feast, which is a community of changemakers, innovators, artists who are lending their skills towards making the world a better place. So have done everything from large scale 400-person conferences with thousands of people participating virtually to very intimate 10-person gatherings and building community all along the way around different shared issue areas that we're passionate about, to also just getting the community together to connect and get to know each other. So I've designed a lot of toolkits as a way for people to come together and have exercises to do, and helped a lot of people in building their own communities. So I'm just excited to be here and to share and help hold this space and answer any questions and support and empower you all in your journeys as community builders, because it's one of the most important things in the world right now, I believe. So it's me. Yeah, Beth, you want to go?
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me as well. I'm also very pleased to be here. I'm Beth McIntyre. I'm the head of community at Bevy and CMX. I come to you from a different world. I come to you from the tech startup industry, and with a focus on how businesses are building communities to increase their business and as sales channels and as marketing channels. So I have a different perspective, I think, but the point of CMX, our mission, is to help community professionals thrive. So we do that through a variety of training, certifications. We've got online communities. We also run events. But the point is that we train people how to build their own communities. I also come to you because last year you all had to learn how to launch a virtual community. And now we're all kind of wondering, like, how do you not even go back, but like, what is going back? What is this new normal that we're all supposed to go back to? And how do you relaunch a community with a whole new kind of set of values and goals and purposes? So I'm super excited to also talk to you today about that. But I would also like to hear, if we can, why you came to this session, and like, what is the one question or like the one thing that you really want to learn? Like, why are you here, and what can Ray and I talk about that would really like give you the feel good for showing up?
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And perfect, Beth. Thank you. Yes. Please respond to Beth's question and share in the chat why you're here, what you're looking to get out of this. And I'm sure Ray and Beth can speak to those goals throughout this conversation. And also, if you have specific questions, drop those in there too, and we'll try and get to all of those throughout the conversation as well. Yeah, really want to make this as useful for you as possible. So thank you, Beth and Ray, again for joining us. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I think the first one, just to take a step back and think a bit larger view here. You both talked a little bit about these other worlds you come from and these different perspectives you're bringing to this community, which I think is a big part of what people are excited to hear about and the value of this discussion. So I'm curious, from your experience, what do you think is the future of community building and events as we transition out of COVID and into a, dare I say, post-COVID world? What does that look like, given what you're seeing and the trends that you're experiencing?
Beth, I'm going to poke you to go first.
Okay, I would love to. Well, I think that for as long as humans have been around, community has been important. Ray, you said this is the most important work we can be doing is bringing people together. Last year we were already at the brink of a pandemic in social isolation. A lot of people were starting to feel even more isolated than ever before. And that was even before we were told to stay home and not talk to anybody. We did our best to move into a virtual space where we could find belonging and find connection and build real relationships with people, even through a computer screen. And now I think that people are desperate to build true connections and meet people in person. So the way that I kind of see the future of community building is that it's going to be everywhere. Community is already a buzzword in the tech world. You won't find a tech startup that's not building a community of some kind. And so I think that more and more we're going to start seeing real companies, big business, build these community spaces for people to come together and learn and grow with each other. Same with events. We're not going back. I mean, maybe we are. I don't know. Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you for setting that context, Beth. I think that's really important to acknowledge that even before the pandemic, we were facing a pandemic of isolation that had just been recognized or just been starting to be recognized. Loneliness, having ministers of loneliness and people who are assigned to really figure out how to address this as a society. And so I think that, the future of community building as we move forward, it's going to be a process of discovery, I think, in part because I think the pandemic was a very big experience of a wide variety for people, right? Some people had a wonderful time. Some people had a heartbreaking time. And as we start to come back together, I think there, are people who are ready to rush in and for things to be back to normal. And there are people who really need to process what happened and or engage in maybe even new relationships or in old relationships in a new way. And so I think one thing that is interesting across the board is the acknowledgement of the importance and the desire for, as you mentioned, Beth, like real, authentic, meaningful relationships. And so there is a hunger and an opportunity across the board to provide meaningful relationships, right? I think we may see this hopping about to, I think before there's so many things to do. There were certain people I wouldn't see for years, and I'd go from this to that. And I think that there may be some of that just because of the hunger to see people. But I think one thing that is even deeper than that is the desire for real connection. And so I think, there is an opportunity to also facilitate that digitally as well. I think, one thing that we saw is that the going online facilitated reach, right? Breadth of reach to people in many different places, maybe more than before. And there is still an opportunity there to facilitate, again, those deeper, richer, more meaningful connections with, people from around the world. But that there's also the ability to do that in person too. Again, I think that there will need to be a lot of nuance in that moving forward, especially in this interim period. So facilitation is going to be, I think, key. Clear articulation of, how do I say, how it is that the space is being held to account for everybody's safety, and what the goal of coming together is about. But I think that there's just going to be more and more opportunity for those deeper relationships, for those deeper conversations to be happening in these spaces. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. Yeah, it's so interesting to be thinking about these connections, building these connections. I think, Beth, even thinking about those connections in the workplace, right? And on the networking side, professional side is of interest as well as on the social side. And so it really seems to be across all of these different elements. And one thing that we see with giving circles is that people engage with them for a variety of reasons, right? And often it's very much driven by the community and wanting to give back and the causes. It's also driven though by wanting to connect with others and build those relationships. And in some cases that's to find that new friend or feel more connected socially. In other cases, there can also be interesting networking opportunities that come out of that as well. And some groups like to enable that and support that. So really a variety of ways in which people are thinking about these gatherings and coming together for giving circles. And so I'm just curious, given this, I wonder if you have a sense of the types of events that work best for which types of communities and goals, and maybe which kinds of tools and platforms, to get it a little bit more into specifics, are really well suited to facilitate those types of events. So I know that's very broad, but is you're thinking about in-person events moving into a hybrid or into completely back in person, how does one person think about that and managing that as they're thinking about their particular community and what the goals are of that community, learning, networking, socializing, supporting one another? Any particular thoughts just to help people give them a strategic framework, I guess, to think that through? I know both of you have done a lot of that framework building for others.
Ray, you can go first this time.
I knew it. So this is a great question. And I think, so people talk about Zoom fatigue, right? I totally understand it. And I think actually the reason that Zoom fatigue happens is that there are too many things trying to happen in a Zoom call. And at least for me, I know that if my attention is not captured in a meaningful way, that's when I start to get fatigue, right? I start to feel like my energy could be used elsewhere. My mind starts to wander elsewhere. I then start to check my phone. But if there is a really authentic, meaningful story being shared, or a heartfelt moment, if somebody's really sharing something deeply meaningful to them, I don't get fatigued. I think there's a level of connection that can happen that feels more than just listening to something passively. And that's the beauty of our connectedness, right? Everything from mirror neurons firing to empathy gets turned on when we are sharing authentically with each other. And so I just say that to say, as we transition to thinking about in-person versus online and why to use it, I think it's important to consider, again, like why are you having this meeting, right? What are you wanting to accomplish in it? And therefore, what medium are you using? You wouldn't call a Zoom call necessarily to take a poll. That's why you send a poll. You wouldn't necessarily get together in person to, I don't know, put together a newsletter, right? Something that's like tactical that you can do on your own. I actually have this problem with conferences. I think that people shouldn't get together to listen to someone speak, because you could do that at home and then come together and talk to each other, which is why you're in person. So I think that there's a lot of thoughtfulness that can happen, especially now, given we're really thinking more carefully about like, why are we coming together in person, to consider, how to use that space and time, and how to use virtual space and time. So, virtual space and time, like this gathering is really great because we can, take your questions real time. We can collectively, in the chat surface whether something is clear or not, or if there's a shared something that we want to discover or understand. So, a Zoom call might be great if you're doing a giving circle with the people who are nominated, so that you can ask them questions, get to know them, maybe break out into small groups and get to know each other and why you care about the issue, with people all around the world so that they can be present and participate, right? And again, you can facilitate meaningful connection, even virtually. Asking people to tell a story about why they care about a particular issue is a great way to build deeper relationships, even online, right? What you don't want, I think what is less easy to facilitate online is the synchronicity and serendipity that happens in real life when you're, running into people and having conversations and having this, melding, merging sort of experience. There are ways of facilitating, that's a space in which connection is also easy to form and networking is easy to happen. You just talk about what's happening in your life and someone else comes over and you say, oh, we were just talking about this and you do that. It's a little bit harder to facilitate that in virtual world unless you build out a virtual space. And there are some tools in the document related to that. There's a space called Gather, which I've used, which sort of mimics walking around in a room. And so you can sort of run into people. But in general, that's the kind of space that is easier to facilitate in person. Celebrations are also, really fun in person because you can feel the energy of the space, but you can also do that online. So I think if there is a constraint of needing to do something online, I think it is possible. But again, there are certain strengths to doing things online, certain strengths to doing things in person. There is a question I noticed in here about, I don't know if we're doing questions, but I don't know, Beth, if you want to speak to it, the hybrid piece. And that is, granted, it's a tricky one. And I think it's one that, I don't know about you, Beth. I don't know if you've mastered any tips or tricks around this. I think that there are certain ways of facilitating that hybrid. And again, it just takes some thought around how you want to build those relationships, what conversations you want to facilitate between the members of the community that are really building those bonds. And then, what do you want to, that's just sort of more informational or tactical. But I've been talking a lot, Beth, if you want to share any thoughts.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you about the Zoom fatigue. I have a theory about Zoom fatigue that it's not real, but we'll get to that another day. And absolutely 100% agree that it's all about the intention. So we actually have a framework that I didn't add to the doc, but will add to the doc. It's called the 7 Ps. So it's before you, basically it's before you do anything. It's our framework for building belonging. People use it for online spaces, which is like a forum or a Slack community or a Facebook group. People also use it for events. But the 7, and now you're going to test me, are the purpose, the people, the place, the participation. Okay, now I've forgotten. Policy. Anyway, the point is the place is the one that I want to talk about, because unfortunately, the answer to this question isn't like, oh, this kind of event goes here, this kind of event goes here. It's more, does this place make your members feel safe? How does your place of gathering inspire your members? Oh, thanks, Isis. Coming to the rescue at the final 2 Ps. What habits or preferences need to be accounted for when they come into this platform? Jean, I saw your question, like, how do we enable people to be together, but not create any obstacles? And that's a really good question. So I think it comes down to who are the people that are in your community, and how can you build a place that they all feel safe and comfortable and inspired to attend. I also saw Lori's comment about like hybrid being adding a virtual component to in-person meetings. How does that work? And I will let you know that this is what the entire event industry is talking about right now. What does hybrid even mean? I actually was just chatting with an event manager the other day, and she had to go on the dictionary and define what hybrid event is. And it's so general. There's so many different ways you could take the definition and make it your own, that this is definitely a challenge others are also experiencing. I will say, like hybrid just means that there is a virtual and an in-person component. The way I see it, and kind of piggybacking on what Ray said about conferences, what if we lived in a world where you could all get together in person and watch a video of someone speaking and then talk about it right then and there in your own little networking space? Like, to me, that's a cool hybrid event. What if you could watch like a Beyonce concert with your friends in your house and then party with Beyonce, but like virtually? So this is the way that I'm kind of seeing hybrid, but every company, every event industry professional is looking at it different, and differently. But from the very beginning, I'd say intention is like number one. Why are you going to this space? What is the purpose? Who are the people that are going to be gathering? And are they going to feel safe and inspired to be there? Unfortunately, there's no right answer. Or one answer, I should say.
Or, and maybe fortunately, right? I think there are so many different ways that we can chart this. And so there is no right or wrong. It's just, yeah, learning from each other. And clearly, as Beth pointed out, no one's figured this out, right? The whole industry is considering this. So I think you're in good company. Thank you both for those thoughts. It's, I think, super helpful. And I'm curious if you have any specific examples of hybrid events that have worked well, and even any specific examples of hybrid events that have not worked well, that you could share with our attendees, just to give them something a little more tangible, and any particular tools that you've seen work especially well for that hybrid model. I'm thinking too of the question from Jean about, how do we do this and incorporate this kind of virtual element without it being a distraction? And so I imagine an example or two could be really helpful thinking that through.
The first one I thought of was the Golden Globes. I don't know if anybody watched the Golden Globes, but really that was a really interesting way of doing a hybrid event. They had a small in-person setting where people were sitting at tables. They had Tina Fey and Amy Poehler on stages in New York or LA and New York, presenting to these people in person, but we were watching from the comfort of our own home virtually. So that was a really interesting way of doing a virtual event. Now, could there be some FOMO? Maybe. If I was sitting at home and I wish that I was sitting at a table, meeting people and networking that way, then yes, there could be some FOMO. So there's always a few holes in the plan. But yeah, as for tools, honestly, we're building a tool for hybrid events. So until that's like ready to go, I haven't seen very many that are like amazing. But Ray, maybe you have some experience with some.
Yeah, I was actually going to share an example of a terrible attempt at a hybrid, which is to just dump people into a Zoom call and like call them in, essentially, like to have all the people on Zoom on a call and then all the in-person people in a space, because that just creates like the worst FOMO. You're seeing everybody have fun and you're in your own space in a little box, very little facilitation. It was, I felt terrible for the people on the Zoom call. how maybe I would have done it, and I think somebody asked this as well, is, how do you have the virtual component? Is to maybe, as you mentioned, Beth, having people watch something and then have a conversation about it is a great approach. The people who are watching in person can have a conversation about it, and or the people who are virtual can watch the same thing and have a conversation about it, and then maybe come together at the end, between the people who are virtual and the people who are in person. That way there's a shared experience. Everybody got to view something, learn something, connect around something. The other thing that could work is, I think, having conversations between people who are in person and who are virtual. Oftentimes, the problem with that earlier scenario was this very unfacilitated, everybody's just hanging out, waiting for someone to come talk to this mass of faces. But if you're able to facilitate maybe one-on-one conversations with someone who's virtual, or a group conversation, 2 people who are in person, 2 people who are virtual, then at least there's that connection between the in-person space and the people who are joining virtually, in an intimate setting, which makes people feel seen and heard, especially for people who are introverts. The idea of being on a screen, or the idea of being in a group, is awkward enough, and not actually desirable. So creating intimate settings, especially for people who are not comfortable sharing with a big group, can actually be an asset of weaving in the virtual and taking that time to consider what is an experience an introvert would feel more comfortable with. So creating maybe like a one-on-one, again, dialogue, or like a 3-person dialogue, I think is a great approach.
Sorry, I just want to jump in because I see Nancy's question, and Nancy, we're mind melding, because I was just thinking that like, yeah, if you are a community that's hosting consistent events, like every month you're hosting an event, then I think there's totally room to have every second month is your virtual event, every second month is your in-person event. I think there's absolutely room for that, because then people can, self-identify which kind of event they want to go to. It makes it more accessible that, every second month there's a virtual event that everyone can attend. So yeah, Nancy, I'm with you. I think that that's a really great model.
That's great. And one other thought that I'd love to hear from both of you, or something else I'd love to hear from both of you on, is what kind of community facilitation and community building could happen in between these events, right? We've been talking more about the events themselves. I know both of you are pro community builders and really use the event as just one of the tools in your toolkit for that. So would love to hear from you a little bit more about that side of things beyond the event.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so there's 2 types of community building. There's asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous is when it's not at the same time. That would be like your online community. If you're on Slack or you're on Facebook, that's when things happen and you're not there together at the exact same time. Synchronous is an event, basically. So when you are right now, this is us being synchronous. We're talking, we're learning together, we're asking questions, we're live. Definitely I feel like there needs to be an aspect of both, to truly give your community members a choose your own adventure in a way. Some people, like we know, don't want to come to events. Some people don't want to ask questions in a group. Some people just want to observe. And our job is to make that space safe for all of those different kinds of people. So yeah, when we talk about building community, as a whole, with events being one component of it. Again, we've got all sorts of different, acronyms that we use, but the identity cycle is kind of like the biggest and most important one. And that's about identifying who the community is for, and then identifying what kind of community space you're going to build for them. So again, the person who identifies with the community and is attracted to the identity of the group. So this is a great example. All of you have a group that you're trying to build community for. And when you look at how those people participate and then how you're validating that participation, that is kind of how you can start to build a asynchronous space as well. Yeah, I think that we host a program called CMX Connect, which is our distributed events. We have over 80 volunteers around the world who are hosting events on our behalf, and those are hosted once a month. And in between those times, all of those attendees and speakers and everybody who attended those events come to our global community space, either on Facebook or Slack, and they have their questions answered. So they feel like they're a part of something even between the events. It gives them a chance to learn from other people as well, not just the people who they met at the event, but it gives them a chance to learn from a global audience. And then also gives them a chance to actually forge further connections with the people they did meet at those events, so that they'll want to go back to the event the next month. They can't wait to see those people again. They can't wait to follow up on, what they did that month with what they learned at the last event, kind of thing. And so those are things that I did share in the doc, is like, how do you build a community from scratch? How do you identify who's going to be in that community? How do you engage with the people who are in this community? And that goes beyond events. That's the in-between part.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. I feel like you have more frameworks than me, so I appreciate you you're like, this is how to think about it.
Yeah, we got frameworks coming out of all places.
Love a good framework. So agree with everything that you shared. I think, the in-between space is actually, I feel like, the least utilized and probably the most powerful, right? And this happens everywhere. Major conferences that spend thousands of dollars to bring people together do nothing in between one event and another. It's really fascinating. And it's a really big opportunity, I think, for whatever it is that whatever it is that you would love to see your community embody, I guess, and this really goes to, what kind of community do you want to have? Do you want to have a community where everyone feels really connected with the issue? Do you want to have a community that feels like it knows each other? Do you want to have a community that feels like it's a group of friends? Maybe you don't. Maybe it's enough to just, have a group of people who, are passionate about giving. But depending on, what kind of community experience you want, that can really shape, how you bring people together in the in-between space. There was a conversation about networking and the potential for, that to happen. But networking happens also within spaces of trust. And those in-between spaces are a great opportunity for people to come together to build the relationships that allow for that support to happen. So, as Beth mentioned, you can have asynchronous experiences of learning where people are maybe asking questions, especially of the grantees, or if there's a particular issue that your giving circle is focused on, to share in learning more about that issue and getting educated in that issue. If you're, you could have experiences where people maybe listen to one of the grantees share a story and reflect together on what that story made you feel about the impact that you created together, or why this issue is meaningful to you. You could, just have gatherings where, asynchronously to say, go on a walk with each other and, get people to pair up one-on-one and just get to know each other. There's lots of things that you can do in the in-between spaces that also don't have to be a heavy lift, that can either be self-organized or that can leverage the skills within the community, right? Some people are really passionate about research and learning about different issues. So maybe if that's something that your giving circle is interested in, maybe you could invite that person to sort of help lead that initiative, and share, like links and things that you're finding about the topics. So again, there's a lot that can be done, and a lot that you can empower the community to do too, if that's something that the community also wants. So
Thank you both, Beth and Ray, for your thoughts there. I love it. Frameworks and some very real specific examples and ideas. So a really nice combination of things there. It feels like your community, getting to know your community members and learning more about what they're interested in and trying to facilitate that. And then any number of opportunities can come from that, but that seems like ground zero. So I know we only have a few more minutes. We have a couple of questions, so I'd love to just see if we can answer these couple of questions in a quick response format and leave no one hanging. So Ray and Beth, feel free to jump in. But here's one from Daniel. Can you share a few tips for making the presentation of information and procedures more engaging virtually? Oof, it's a tough one. I want to know the answer to that too.
ISIS gifts for sure. We call it gamification. When you build things out into your community strategy, like how you're going to engage with people or, kind of make them do stuff, you make it a game. So it becomes friendly competition. Maybe you get a shout out, maybe you get a piece of swag, maybe you get something special because you did this thing. So typically we try to make things into games. I also agree with GIFs. I also agree with memes. These are the sorts of things that can really build a shared identity. If you have GIFs and memes that everybody gets because they're all, in the inside circle of your community. And I would also say talking like your friends on a virtual event is really important. It's something that I've been doing. I feel like I'm friends with all of you listening. And so I'm here being your friend. GIFs are fun videos that are they repeat themselves. And I'll send you a couple. They're all funny.
Perfect. Ray, I'm going to send a different question your way, which is from ISIS. We've seen some awesome tools, but they only work on certain browsers or require the latest Zoom update. What do you think about forcing people to do that work, knowing it might make for a great collaborative experience, but reduce accessibility?
mm-hmm.
How much do you push your community versus, let them guide?
Yeah, I'm gonna, because I've noticed a couple of other questions about accessibility. So maybe I can kind of roll this in. Accessibility is obviously a huge issue, especially as we're considering, older community members, people who don't have great internet access. Not everybody has that luxury. And so I tend to actually opt for the simplest, lightest weight gathering platforms. There are some amazing platforms that I even have friends who have built, but they're just very heavy technologically or bandwidth wise. So I would say if I were running a giving circle and wanted to make it as accessible as possible, I think Zoom is great because it is super low bandwidth and allows for gathering and sort of like the basic technologies, but I think that at some point I guess the thing that comes to mind is supporting how do you best support the community members that would have the greatest challenge with getting access to the most accessible tools? So not so much forcing them, but, is there someone within the community who is maybe good at technology who can help them set that up? Is there someone, if it's something that needs to be done in person, who could help them in person? Just with the understanding that everybody is at different levels of technological literacy, and that's fine and great. But, I think that if you are also choosing the lowest weight options, that at some point it is helpful to have a go-to option. So to say, this is how we're doing this, and this fits the most possible members of the community, and to just go with that. Obviously, if there's someone who doesn't have access to internet or something that would preclude them from using that platform, finding a way for them to call in or some other aspect or some other approach like that could work. But yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Beth or Emily, if you wanted to move on to a different question. But
yeah, no, thank you for that, Ray. I appreciate that. I think that's something we hear a lot about, that tension of wanting to make things accessible, but also trying to create a great experience and feeling a bit torn. So it's definitely a delicate balance, it sounds like. So we are just a couple minutes over. We do need to wrap up, unfortunately. But thank you both, Beth and Ray, for all of your great thoughts and ideas, for sharing everything you have today. And thank you everyone who has joined us today, and for all of your great questions. There is a community space, I've heard, so we can head over to that community space. If you have additional questions, you can post them there. I'll go there. I don't know if Beth and Ray are able to join or for very long, but happy to connect there. And Beth and Ray, please do join if you're able. And then would just love to close this out with a last word from our panelists. Just one piece of advice that you want to leave our Giving Circle leaders with here today.
Beth, you want me to go first? I'll keep it short because I know that we're over. But just to create the community that you'd want to be a part of, is what comes to mind. There's a lot that can be done with community, and maybe don't overthink it, but consider, just what it is that you'd want. How is it that you'd want to connect with other people? What would you love to experience? And letting that sort of be your guide. The other thing is just that the community has a lot of wisdom within it, and that wisdom is an asset to you if you ask for it. If you ask for advice, for support, and allow yourself to listen to what comes, your community can be your biggest asset. So I guess I'll leave with that.
Thank you.
Yep, that's exactly. I was going to say, ask the community. There's no need for you to know all the answers yourself. Like Ray said, your community is your greatest asset. They will tell you what they want. They will tell you what they feel comfortable doing. They will tell you what makes them feel safe and inspired. And all you have to do is ask and then actively listen.
Brilliant. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for your help and for your participation. And we will see you in the community forum or at Giving Circles Are Rooted in Fun, the next event that is shared here in the chat. So have fun with it. Reach out anytime if you have any questions. If we can ever be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of our contact information is in the Google Doc shared. So hopefully we'll talk to you soon.